All right, we have been making excellent progress through here. So we've done our custom states. We still need to talk about hidden variables, but we knocked out reusables, which actually finishes up our storing and moving data around discussion. So that's good. And coming into our profile, we've already started with just setting the content type of this profile page to be profile. So it's expecting a profile. And I just realized we have some issues, so let's go back and take care of our issues. So trigger a custom event. Oh, I deleted the custom event here. I was doing this in demonstration before. So that handled that. Perfect. So back to our profile page. We've already set the type of content to be profiles, so we know we need to pass in a profile in order to pull the information and show it on the page. So now let's go ahead and check out our scope for this page. The purpose of the profile page is to view other users' profiles. So the account page was so that we could view and edit our own profile. And then the purpose of the profile page is to view other users' profiles. So there's no editing component, it's just viewing. So the title of the page is going to be the app name and then the user name's profile. So here we're going to say insert dynamic data. We'll do a search for app settings, the first item. We'll grab that app name, then we'll do a space and a pipe. Then we're going to insert dynamic data, and we're going to say the current page profiles, first, last, and then we're going to do an apostrophe S and then profile. So now we've got two dynamic pieces to the name of the page. Coming back to the scope, look at our permissions. Only logged in and active users can remain on this page. Admins can view all fields of information for the current page profile. Owners of the current page profile are redirected to their account page. Standard users can only view specific fields of information for other users' profiles. So, when we created our privacy rules, we said that certain fields are visible to all logged in users and then the rest of the fields are visible to the app admin and the owner of the profile. So if we go back and revisit exactly who can see what in our privacy, we can see that a logged in user should be able to see the bio, the interests, the company, the years of company, the picture, and the first name. But if we go to our page here in our design, you can see that we've got the bio, the name, we've got date of birth, interests, almost all of it, including the resume and the references here. So we're going to want to pick and choose which information that we're going to show the different people on the page, but let's just start with our primary concern, making sure that only the right people are allowed to stay on the page. So we're going to do when condition is true. So when the current user is logged out or the current user's inactive is yes. And we'll just say every time, force a habit, probably superstitious. Well, now we're going to navigate, go to page, index. All right, and that's going to take care of making sure only the right people can stay on the page. Now we can say here, if do another do when here, we can say only when the current page profile is the current user's profile. Then we want to navigate the user to their account page so that they can make changes to it. And we'll say current user's profile. And that takes care of this option here. So only logged in and active users can remain on the page. Owners of the current page profile are redirected to their account page. So admins should be able to view all of the fields, and standard users can only view specific fields of information. So let's go look at the difference again between admins and standard users in the privacy rules. So admins can see everything, and standard users, the current user is logged in, they can only see bio interest, so they're not going to be able to see the resume. So if we come back into our design here and we look at this section here, this resume section, we're going to make this not visible on page load and collapsed when hidden. And we're only going to show it if the current user's role is app admin. Now, it wouldn't matter if we didn't say that, because if the user is only a standard user, they wouldn't be able to see the resume. It won't populate here because they're not allowed to see it per the privacy rules. But it would look kind of weird if you see a field that says resume and you don't see any resumes listed. So we'll go ahead and hide it for users who are not app admin. We're also going to do the same for references. We're going to make this not visible on page load and collapsed when hidden, and only show it when the current user's role is app admin. Let's go check and see if there's anything else like that. So we know that they can't see the resume. They should not be able to see the title according to our list here. I think they should see the title. I think that's fine. But they shouldn't see the last name, and they shouldn't see the date of birth. So let's go and make sure those aren't showing. So in our design here, our date of birth section, we'll say not visible on page load, collapsed when hidden, and the conditional here is going to be current user's role is app admin, then they can see it. And don't see the title on here anyway. It seems to be missing. And then we come back into our data, and it looks like our interests is checked. They should be able to see our interests. But something that we haven't done, we haven't refactored yet, is now we have an interest table. And our field here is of interest. So now we should be able to go back and make our interests and populate our interests. So we'll refactor that right now. So we're going to pop into our account page. I'm going to go to the interest section, into this multi-select, and we're going to change this from being static choices to dynamic choices. And our choices source is going to be a search through the database for all of the interests where the inactive is equals no. And then the option caption is going to be a current options name. And the default here is going to be the current page profile's interests. And then we are going to enable auto binding on the parent elements thing, and the field to modify will be the interests. And actually, I don't think that's true. I think we put everything on the save button. So I will uncheck the enable auto binding, and then when we save, when we make changes here, we will add all fields, and we will set the list to be the multi drop-down text interest value. And then we also need to do the same on the login page, because remember, that's where we get the information for the profile in the first place. So we're going to come in here and do the same thing. Dynamic choices, do a search for interests. We'll choose where inactive equals no. Option caption will be current options name, and there won't be a default value. And then on the save button, we'll add interest. We'll set the list to the multi drop down text interest value. So now we're set up and prepared to display that information. We can go to the profile page and we can look at this interest. This is also going to be a multi drop down, but we're going to leave this one disabled. They're not going to be able to change it from here because remember, it's not the current profile's owner that's showing that is looking at this page. It's going to be someone else looking at the profile. So we'll make the same dynamic choices, and it will be of type interest, and it's going to be the current page profiles. Let's see here. Current page profiles interest, current options name, and it'll be current page profiles interests. Now there's something subtle that we've just done that I'm not sure you would have picked up. We've used the inactive field from the admin portal to control whether an option is available in the multi-select when the user is creating and editing their profile. But what we haven't done is limited the person's interests here to just those that are active. We're going to, if a person chooses an option from the list that is active when they're creating or editing their profile, and then the administrator makes it inactive, so it's not available anymore, when someone views the profile of the person who chose the now inactive interest, they will still be able to see the inactive interest. The reason this is important is because you don't want to abandon or orphan profiles in the course of moderating your app, right? So what you'd want to do is you want to build in the functionality to go and find the people who have the tag or the interest that you want to change it to something else, or contact them and give them notice, or somehow, some way make sure that they're still searchable per their interest in the search page, which we'll worry about when we get to the search page, to the portal page in a moment. All right, so that one is set, and interest is visible by everyone. I believe company and years of company should also be visible by everyone. So company and years of company should be visible. Only the first name should be visible out of the names, and the picture should be visible, and the bio should be visible. So coming in here, we've got interests, we have the bio here, so let's go ahead and set the bio. We'll insert current page profiles bio. We have the name here, so remember we want to show the full name if it's an app admin and the first name if it is a regular user. So we'll insert dynamic data, we'll say current page profiles, and then actually we'll make this a condition. We'll say current user's role is app admin, formatted as text. If they are app admin, then we'll say current page profiles first last. If they're not an app admin, we'll just say current page profiles first. And then the title we decided we were going to leave in, so we'll go ahead and say current page profiles title. This button is not really necessary and this button is also not necessary because we're automatically routing the user who owns this profile to their account page to edit it. So I'm just going to delete that and delete this button altogether. The profile pic, this should be the current page profiles picture. We can go ahead and process by ImageX, resize to fit the dimensions. Interest is populated. The company here should be current page profiles company. Years of company should be the current page profiles years of company. And I think that should do it. But let's go back and check the scope and see what we might be missing. So admins can view all the information for the current page profile. Standard users can only view specific fields. So we've got our permissions handled. We've got our title handled. We've got our purpose understood. And in our sections, the header, we're not going to bother with. This is something we can control from our reusable. And our profile section, we've got that, the view and activity. We've decided we're going to route our users, so we kind of eliminated the need for the edit profile button. And admin only, date of birth, first, last name, resume, reference letters, standard profile. Yep, I think we're good to go on this page. The only thing I can think of is when I arrive on this page, if for some reason I don't have a profile, I need to add a profile to it. So where am I going to go? What am I going to do if I arrive on this page and I don't have a profile in it? So I'm going to do when condition is true, and I'm going to say when current profile, page profile is empty, I'm going to navigate the user to the index, and that will send them where they need to go. And that's what I was doing here. So really technically to cut down on the number of workflows, I can just say current user is logged out or current user is inactive is yes, or current page profile is empty, and now it's handled. So let's preview the page and understand that we're not sending in a profile, so we should be sent to the index, which sent us to the home page because we're logged out. Let's go and send in a profile. We have it set up from the admin portal to do that. So I'm going to go into my app data and I'm going to run as an app admin. And now if I go into my users, I can pick one and I can see Adam Jameson's profile. Now Adam Jameson doesn't have interests on file because the interests wasn't working when he created his profile. Well, when I created his profile. So let's log in as him. Let's try this one. And it should send me to this page. That should be right. So I want to go into my account page. And I don't currently have a way to go to my account page because we haven't set up our portal. So I'm just going to highlight it in the URL and go to account. And now I should be able to add my interests and click save. And now if I log back into the admin portal as an admin and I go to Adam's profile, I can see the interests populated. My date of birth, I forgot to set it on the page, so we can go and take care of that now. Go into the profile page. And the date of birth, let's just look for it here. This should be set to the current page profile's date of birth. And then interest is handled. Let's see, what else am I missing? We have date of birth, interest, company, years of company. The resume and references aren't populating, so let's check in what's going with that. So resume. So the resume is set as a link. And then here we want to show a file. So let's just show file like that. And then this is going to be link destination is going to be an external URL. The destination is going to be the current page profiles resume. Let's open it in a new tab. And so let's just refresh the page and click on the resume, and it takes us to the resume on file. And then for references, this actually needs to be a repeating group. So let's look up references. So this is a file repeating group. The data source is going to be the current page profile reference letters. And then within each cell here, we've got the link again. So let's show an icon instead of a text and show the different documents. So we'll say file. And then it'll go to an external page. The destination will be the current cell's file, and we'll open it in a new tab. So I have one reference on file, and I go, and it ends up being this picture here. And I think that's it. I think that is handled now. So let's just double check our scope. So the admin sees date of birth, first, last name, resume, and reference letters. That's true. The standard and admins can see the profile picture, the first name, the bio, the interests, the company, and years of company. So we did set all of those. All right, and I think that means we can go ahead and consider the profile page built. And next up is the portal page. So let's get started with the portal page. I'm going to navigate in here, and the first thing we're going to look at is our scope, and we'll find the purpose. The purpose of the page is for standard users to view other users and their profiles and to navigate to their account page. The title should be the app name and a pipe character in portal, so let's do that first. So we'll insert dynamic data, do a search for our app settings, find our first item, and say app name, then come and add a space and a pipe character, and then we'll go ahead and say portal. And coming in and looking at our permissions, only logged in and active users can remain on this page, so we'll come to our workflows. We'll do when condition is true, and we'll say when current user is logged out or current user's inactive is yes. Then we'll navigate the user to the index page. And that should take care of our permissions and our title and our purpose. Now into the sections, we're going to come back and hit the header for all of the different pages. Actually, this one is different because this header is more like the admin portal's header than it is for our the rest of our pages. So let's head back to our admin portal, and we'll get a little bit of experience creating reusables. So we'll come into this header user container, and we're going to go ahead and convert to a reusable element, and we'll call this, let's call it header 2. And then we'll come into the page, so double click on the top element. In the layout here, width for UI, we'll just go ahead and say 900, not 9,000, 900 is fine. And looks like it flipped it around. If I recall correctly, on our page, if I run my admin portal as an admin, I've got my picture on the right and then the home icon and then the text welcoming the user back. And I come into my header 2. My picture is now on the left. The text, they flipped it around. So I'm going to click into my picture, into the layout, and I want to make this last. And then I want to take the icon and make it next. And now they should be set back to where they were supposed to be. All right, so welcome back, current user's profile's first name is not empty, formatted as text. So just reviewing what we did before, we said if we have a first name, we'll use it, and if not, we'll have it say friend. And then the click on this button should still exist, and it does. It will navigate to the home page as we decided it should, and the current user's profile picture processed with ImageX. We should probably change this alt tag here and just say, let's see, the current user's profiles first last will work. And the condition, if it is empty, if there's no picture, we'll use the static picture of a user icon instead. So, and this type of reusable right now is set to be a group. We'll make it a floating group and we'll make it top right. And I think we want to make the max width of it to be about, we go and look here. We don't want it to stretch across the whole screen. We just want it to stretch here, so it really should be less than the full width. So let's give it about, we'll just give it a shot at, let's try 800 and see if that keeps it to where we want it to be. Now let's try it. We're going to come to our admin portal and we're going to grab the header and remove it. And then we're going to come back to the bottom here, grab header 2, drop it on the page. And that looks about right. And let's just refresh our page and see how it looks. And it exists and it's okay. It's just before on our other header, we had already moved the rest of the page down to accommodate the header. So it wasn't overlapping with our content when we were at the top of the page. So now to fix that on the admin portal, we'll have to look at the rest of our groups here. So our main wrapper is here. And let's give it a top margin. Let's see, let's give it a top margin of about 50 and just see how that works. That's not quite big enough. Let's go with 60. And then refresh the page. And that looks about right. Now we need some space here, so we want to move this over so it matches up with our element. We want to move everything to the left. So let's go back into our header 2. And right now, these elements are inside of our reusable header, just plainly. They're not inside of another group. So I'm going to group them. So I'm holding down Shift and clicking each of the elements, and I'm going to group them in a row container. In that row container that I just made, I want to apply some gap spacings, and I want to do column gap of about, start with 10 and see if that's enough. I think that will be enough. And then I want to come in here in the padding, and I want to put a padding on the right of about 30 to start. And that looks better. And we probably want to put a little bit of padding on the top. Let's go ahead and give it 10. Yeah, that looks like what I want. So back into our portal page, we can take this header and go ahead and remove it. We'll come into the main wrapper here, and we'll put a top margin of 60 on it. Move it down to make space for our new header. Then click on header 2 and drop it on the page. And then when we preview our portal page, it looks great. It looks fine. All right, so coming back into our scope, it's just showing us what should happen here. It says that the home icon should be hidden on this page, and I think it actually said that it should be hidden for the admin portal as well. Let's just double check. Home icon should be hidden. So we can go ahead and do that from our header 2. Just take this home icon layout, make it not visible on page load, and collapsed when hidden. And that should take care of it in both places. That way we don't have to do the work on both, on 2 different headers, because it's the same in the reusable. So then back to portal. We'll go ahead and mark our header section complete and move into the sidebars. So on mobile, this is what it should look like. On desktop, this is what it should look like. But one thing that I know is coming up is this dashboard here is a placeholder for follow-on work. It's not actually going to be a click, so we should probably hide the dashboard icon and the dashboard text button. So we'll just come into right-click on the text here and select the first parent. And it didn't pull it up on in our properties editor, so I'm just right-click on it again and pull it up. That way I can see it. Come to the layout. Say this element is not visible on page load and collapsed when it's hidden. And then I'm assuming that the nav menu container. So this will hide this particular option from this group and everything will collapse up. Then coming into the icon itself, looking at its first parent. So the nav icon tab 1 group, we're going to go ahead and make that not visible on page load and collapsed when hidden. And so if I refresh the page, my directory is not there anymore. Or my dashboard isn't there anymore, so I can't click on it. Just so you understand where we're headed with that, if you come in and you look at the dashboard group, it's the one that's called charts actually. Something that's very common to apps is reports or some sort of charting mechanism where you can see some statistics about what's going on in the app. In this case, we don't have time to get into it, but this is where you could come back and you could figure out what would be interesting to your standard users to show them here, and you can go ahead and build out your logic and your widgets to show them. So that can be on your own time, and if you have any ideas and you're having trouble implementing them, just give us a shout and come on for a complimentary session of office hours and we can help you out. So looking at the next section, so we can go ahead. Oh, actually we need to finish up our sidebars. So when we click on the people or colleagues section, we want to come to the colleagues list here. So let's go ahead and make those button clicks work. So we're going to right click on our text here For colleagues, we'll select the first parent and we're going to add a workflow. And just like we did on the admin portal, we're going to come in and create a custom event and we're going to call it Navigate tab. We'll add a new parameter and call it tab text, and we'll make that of type text. And then we'll navigate, go to page. It will be the portal page, and the data to send will be the tab text, and that's how we're going to populate the second page path for navigating the different groups on the page. So when nav1 tab is clicked, we're going to trigger the custom event, and the text that we're going to send in will be the parent group's thing. In this case, it's going to be this group's text, I think. There we go. So this group's text. So then we're going to, you could also do that by saying nav tab 1's text. So this group's text or nav tab 1's text. So let's do nav tab 1's text to be consistent with the way that we did it on the other page. Now we'll add the same thing to the icon. So we can right click and select our first parent, add a workflow. Go ahead and trigger the custom event, and we'll send in nav tab 1's text. Coming back to the design, we'll grab the first parent of the second text here. Oh, I think we did it on the wrong ones, because remember, we're hiding these. They won't see these at all. So we should have actually put it on this icon and the second text. So we'll come back here and we'll fix it. We'll say nav icon 2. And nav tab 2. And then the same here, we'll say nav tab 2 and nav tab 2. There we go. And now for the third one, we'll grab the first parent, add a workflow, custom event, trigger a custom event, and we'll say nav tab 3 and its text. And then we'll grab the first parent of the icon. And we will, and actually I think this is wrong, because the account page, we actually want to send them to their account. So we'll just switch this up. Nav icon 3, we actually should navigate, go to the account page and send in the current user's profile. Because remember, the account page is expecting the current user's profile so that they can edit their own profile. So I'm just going to copy this action here and move it over to the nav tab 3 and paste. And then the logout button here, if I select first parent, we want it to be to log the user out. And then the same for the first parent of the text here for logout. We want to log the user out. And I think that's it. I think for our navigation that will work. If I click colleagues, you can see it sending me to the colleagues tab here. And then if I click account, it's taking me to the account page. And if I click on this user, it takes me to the account page. If I click back on the colleagues here, it takes me to the colleagues, and log out will work. All right, so now we need to make sure that we load the colleagues section when the person first arrives on the page. So that's going to be on page load. So when the page is loaded, we'll navigate and go to the portal page, and we'll send in nav tab 2's text And we're only going to do that when we get data from the page URL, the path segments list, item number 2, and it's empty. That way nobody arrives on the page with a blank page. They will always see some content. So let's go check our scope again. I think our sidebar is done. Mark that complete. And the dashboard here should be hidden on page load, so it shouldn't be shown at all. So let's find our chart section. Come to our layout. It's already not visible on page load and it's collapsed when hidden, so we don't need to change that. That's actually done already for us. So we'll mark that off of our list. For the colleagues section, we have our repeating group, and it's a look at all of the standard users. So our view, what we should be able to see inside of the repeating group is the title, subtitle. So here we've got our title and our subtitle. And then within the tile list, we should see the profile picture as the tile background. Then we should see the first name of the user. The title, their title should be hidden, and we should see which company that they work for. I think this title being hidden is based on the previous privacy rule that said that we weren't going to show a standard user the title, but we've since changed our mind on that and made it visible. So I'm going to remove the hidden part, and we'll go ahead and show the title. So let's set up our repeating group to work. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the charts off of the screen, and I'm going to jump into our colleagues repeating group. So right now it's set to our dummy data in our option sets, and we want to change this and make it a profile. And so we'll do a search for all profiles where the role or where the owner's role is standard. So in order to do that, we're going to need to filter. So search for profiles, and then we'll have a filter, because what we're trying to filter is not based on a field on the profile, is not based on a field that's on the profile. It's based on a field that's on the user. So we'll come here and we'll say, and actually, as I think about it, we don't have access to the owner, and that's okay. We want to keep our user table protected. So if I'm going to filter from standard to admin users, then I would actually need some kind of field on the profile that's available to the user to be able to make that differentiation. And since I don't have that, I'm just going to leave it for now. We're going to do a search for the profiles and just leave that as a search for the profiles here. So now that the repeating group is populating all of the profiles that I have the ability to see, then I can come in here and I can start changing this dynamic data. So first is going to be the name. I'm going to pop in here and I'm going to insert dynamic data, and I'm going to say parent groups thing is not set. So we need to set our content, our type inheritance, our data inheritance within the repeating group. So let's just go ahead and undo the change that I made so that it doesn't disappear off of the page. And we'll come in here and we'll reveal in the elements tree where we are. We'll come back into our repeating group, the top level, and we'll come into the very next group and change this to be a profile. The data source will be the current cells profile. And while we're here, we can see that this is where the image is coming from. So we can go ahead and clear that out and instead insert the current cells profiles picture. And then for the group the next group within the group is this colleague overlay. So we'll make this of type profile. The data source will be the parent group's profile. Then we'll pop in here and see what other groups we have. We've got this colleague content group. We're going to go ahead and make it of type profile and inherit the parent group's profile. And I see two more groups. So this colleague data group will say profile of type parent group's profile, and then the group profile here, make it profile and parent group's profile. And just double check, and that should be all of the content type and data inheritance that we need in our repeating group to work within it. So now popping into the name, when I insert dynamic data, I should see the parent group's profile, and then we can say first name. Then for the second here, the title, we'll say parent group's titles or parent group's profiles title. And for the company, we'll insert dynamic data, parent group's profiles company. And then I don't think we have any instructions in our scope for emailing the user or inviting to a calendar event, but we do have the heart. So let's just check back with our scope. So we can come in here and look at the tile button has a click on it. The vertical ellipsis has a drop-down menu. The email icon button is going to be hidden. The gift icon button or calendar icon button will also be hidden. So we'll come back in here and we will just click on here on the icon itself, go to the layout, make it not visible on page load and collapsed when hidden. And the same with the second icon here, not visible on page load and collapsed when hidden. And then back to our scope, we can cross those off. And we've got all of the view stuff here. These view tiles are taken care of, so we'll go ahead and complete that. And I think the heart button and the vertical ellipsis button both need work, and then the tile button itself. So let's take care of the tile itself. So this colleague overlay group should have a workflow on it. And we've done this workflow before. When we click on it, what it's supposed to happen is it's supposed to navigate the user to that colleague's profile page. So we'll here navigate, go to the profile page, and we'll send in the parent group profile. And that's how we'll end up viewing our colleagues' profiles. So we can go ahead and mark that one off of our list. Then the vertical ellipsis, we're going to have a drop-down menu, and it'll say view profile, and it'll navigate that user to the colleague's profile page. So this is interesting because in order to have the drop-down menu the way that we want it, we're going to need to create it as a reusable element. So a group focus is a group that is going to be aligned with a particular element, relevant to another particular element. And right now, this button is right here on this page. It's not a reusable. And the reason I have to make it a reusable is because it's inside of a repeating group. If I create a group focus and align it here underneath it, it will show every time I click on any of the buttons, it will open that up and it will show it, and it doesn't end up working. So what I'm going to do in order to create this menu effect that I'm looking for, and I just want to double check and see that we don't have it already. The menu here is not already created. So I'm going to right click on this button and I'm going to convert it to a reusable element, and I'm going to call it portal menu and click create. And so now I want it to be the size of this, which is 40 by 40. So I'll just come into my layout for the portal menu. I'm going to make it a column, and I'm going to make it 40 by 40. So now I have this portal menu, and it's going to be sitting there waiting for me to click on it. And when I click on it, I want to see a menu drop down. And I'm going to utilize something called the group focus in order to achieve that. So I'm just going to grab a group focus on the page and just draw it. It does not have to be very big at all because it's just going to have one menu option, which is to view the profile. So I'm going to make this a column just in case we come back and add things to it later. I'm going to make its width an even 100. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to draw a group inside of it. This group will be a column. We could make it a row. It doesn't really matter which. We don't want it to have a fixed width, and we don't want it to have a fixed height. We want it to stretch the whole way. Then within this group, I want to place a text. And for the text, I also don't want to have a width, and I also don't want to have a height. I want it to take up the whole space. And then for the appearance of this, I wanted to say view profile. And that's a little bit, like cutting it a little bit close because the text is so big. So I'm going to come into the text, into its style attribute here. So right now it's set to be body 18 pixels. That's too big. So I'm going to choose instead to make it body 14. And that's maybe not big enough. So let's try body 16. And that's a little bit better. And then in this particular instance, I definitely want it to be centered text. And that brings it into the center. And the line spacing is a little bit off. It's not right in the middle. So I'm going to center the text vertically, and that will give me a better look. All right, so now that's my group focus that I want. Now you'll notice the group focus is all the way up here at the top left. And actually, I want it to be right underneath my button here. So what I'm going to do is come back into the group focus, and I'm going to select the flyout trigger as the anchor element. And you'll see that it creates it, like it moves it right underneath the button of interest, the relevant element, and it does it flush left. I actually want it to be flush right because my button is going to be on the right side of the tile, and so I want this group focus to stay within the tile. That means that I have roughly, because this is 40 pixels and this is, I think, 100 pixels, I want to move this offset. So I want to do the offset left of -60. And now you can see that they're flush right together. And so when I click on this button, the workflow is I want to toggle my group focus. So come to element actions, toggle, and we'll go with group focus A. Now the next thing is when I click on my group within the group focus, so my group A here, I'm going to add the workflow, and I want to navigate, go to page, and go to the profile page of the user's profile. But you'll notice here it's requiring that I enter some dynamic data, and I don't have a profile to send in. So in order to send in the profile, I need to go back to the main reusable properties editor, set the type of content to be profile, and then I need everything to inherit that profile. So the group focus should inherit the profile. Then within the group focus, this group should get the profile. And I think that's it. Yep, that will work. So now I will know in my workflow when I click on that button, go to page profile, I can say parent group's profile is the one that I want to pass in. But I'm not done passing data into this reusable yet, because the reusable itself is on the page. It also has to inherit the content type. So now I'm going to come back into my portal page, into my design, and I'm going to reveal this in the elements tree and see how things are constructed. Because I'm curious what happens if I just delete this. If I delete it, am I going to be able to draw something back in its place? So I'm going to leave it for now, just so I have an area where I can aim for. We're going to go ahead and come to our portal menu and come drop it right here so it'll stay where it needs to be. So now I have my portal menu. I want to go into my layout here and make it fixed width of 40. So it's 40 by 40, and now it's directly on top of the other one. So I'm going to reveal this in the elements tree. And you can see I've got the fly out trigger here and the portal menu. I want to keep the portal menu one, so I'm going to right click and delete, and then click on the portal menu. And you'll see the portal menu has a data source option here. It's not required, but it's there. And this is where I need to inherit the profile from the repeating group cell. So I'll say here the parent group's profile is what's going to populate the menu, so that when I click on the menu option, it knows which profile to send me to. All right, so we've done that. Let's just preview our page and see how we're doing so far. All right, so we see our 3 different profiles. And if I click on this tile, it's taking me to the appropriate profile. Remember, I don't have interest yet because I haven't updated since I refactored to have interest the way they're supposed to be. So now if I click on this button here, I can see I have my menu. Now there are a lot of things we can do to make this look nicer. Michael is probably frustrated looking at this because he's going to want rounded edges. He wants it to be more polished. But does it work? And indeed it does. I click on that button and it brings me to the profile and loads the correct profile. So we have it working. I'll let you worry about the aesthetics. We'll move on to the next part of our scope. So our vertical ellipsis button works. And now you know how to add menus to every item in a repeating group. So now we have our See More button before we get too far. When I first load the page, it should have up to 8 tiles. Then if it has more than 8 in the list, when I click See More, it should actually show me the whole list. So let's talk about the logic to make that work. We're going to come into our repeating group and our search for profiles here. Right now, we're just pulling all of the profiles in, but it says in the scope that I want to limit it to just 8. So the list should show up to 8 by default. So the first thing is I'm going to click the More button after the search for profiles, and I'm going to say items until 8. And that's going to limit me to just 8 profiles. Then for the See More button, if I want to show more than 8, I'm going to add this workflow, and I'm going to come down into my element actions, and I'm going to display list. And the list is going to be the colleagues repeating group. And the data source here is going to be the same search for profiles, but I'm not going to limit it to 8. I'm going to show the rest of them when I click that button. Now I need to be concerned with when this button is visible. So on page load, I'm actually going to make it so that it's not visible and it's collapsed when hidden. Then the conditional to show it, I'm going to say when the repeating group, let's do RG colleagues. So we want to show it when the RG colleagues has more profiles to show than are showing. So we'll say the RG profiles, list of profiles count is less than the search for the profiles count. That means there's more to show. Then we'll make this visible. And that's the only time we'll see it is if we're not seeing all of the tiles that we could be seeing. So that takes care of our See More button. And we've got some filtering to do. So we'll come back up here and we'll look, and we should be able to filter by company, which should be a drop down. And actually we're familiar with this concept already. So we'll make this a static. This is a drop down. We'll make it dynamic choices. The type of choices will be text, just like it was on the admin portal. The choices source, we'll clear this and we'll say it's going to be the RG colleagues list of profiles, each item's company, and then unique elements. And we'll show the current option. We don't need anything else other than the current option for this to work. Then in the repeating group, when we search, we want to go ahead and add the company equals the drop-down company's value, and we want to ignore empty constraints. For the keyword search, it's going to be very similar to what we did on, not very similar, exactly similar to what we did on the admin portal. So we're going to come into our watch input here and just draw a little tiny one there. It's going to be our watch input A, and our keyword search input, we're going to call it keyword. And then we'll copy that onto our clipboard and come back into our watch input A and paste it into our input ID. Just make sure this is a text input the way that we want it to be and it's named properly. Then we're going to come into our search for profiles and we'll say our any field contains the watch input A's value. Our search by name is our search box. It's dynamic choices. It's a list of profiles here. And we're going to just change this to the first name. Not the first last, just the first name, because remember they won't be able to see the first last. They're not allowed to in the privacy rules. So we don't need to narrow this down anymore. We'll just go ahead and leave it as is. And now in our repeating group, we'll just set it so that the unique ID is equal to the search by names values unique ID. And then the view favorites here is going to get into this heart button that we've left visible on the page. I need to be able to track. I need to be able to click this heart button and indicate to the app that this is one of my favorite colleagues and I want to keep track of my favorite colleagues. I can do this in several ways. One is by keeping a list on the current user's profile. Another is to actually create a new table in the database and just have a thing in existence that marks that this person has favorited another person. So let's try it the first way. We'll come into our data, into our data types, and into our user. Because remember, the favorites just needs to be known by the current user, and the current user has access to their full full user record in the database. So I'm just going to make one called favorites, and the favorites will be of type profile, and it will be a list. The reason it's of type profile is the list I'm looking at here is a profile list. That's what I can see. I can't actually see the user behind any given profile. So go ahead and create that. And now I'm come back into the design. And when I click on this heart icon, I want to make changes to the current user and specifically to their favorites. And I want to add the parent group's profile to the current user's favorites. But I only want to do that when the current user's favorites does not contain or doesn't contain the parent group's profile. If it does contain the parent group's profile, so I just copied this workflow entirely, I flip it and we'll say contains the parent group's profile. Then here, instead of adding, I want to remove it. And that's going to toggle whether the profile I'm looking at is a favorite of the user, the current users, or not. Now, that's all well and good. We can check and watch this working in our database. Nothing will change on the page, so I'm going to click the heart button. And then I go in. I'm currently logged in as my admin. The admin's not prevented from seeing this page. And so you can see that my admin that I'm logged in as now has a favorite added to the list. And if I click it again, then you can see that it is removed from the list. So the toggle is working, but we want to give the user an indication that it's worked. So we're going to come back into our design and into this heart icon. And right now it's heart outline. And so let's just make this conditional statement. And we'll say when the current user's favorites contains the parent group's profile formatted as text. And for yes, we'll say heart. And for no, we'll say heart O, which is what it was originally. And I believe that's the correct option. Yep. So if I click on it and it's added, then it will be filled in. And if I click on it and it's not added, then it will be the outline again. So that's how we'll indicate our favorites. Now that takes care of the action part of the heart icon button. Now coming into our filter, when we click on the view favorites, we want to toggle this button to filtering only those that are in our favorites list. So what we can do is we'll go here into this button and we'll add the workflow. Now I can do this a couple different ways. I can display the data with all of the favorites, and then I can display the data without the favorites. But I actually am going to use this opportunity to introduce hidden variables because that's one of the last things on our list of things to cover from before is our hidden variables here. So what I'm going to do is come up here and I'm going to put a state on the page when I click this button, and I'm going to toggle the state yes or no. So I'm going to click on the page itself, come into the I button here, add a new state, and it's going to say favorites with a question mark and then be of type yes, no. Then I'm going to default it to no. So I'm not going to show the favorites only by default. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my repeating group, and I'm going to copy my expression in the data source, come into the conditional, and I'm going to refer back to my favorite state that I just created. So when I conditional here, so when the portal page favorites is yes, then I want to change the data source. And I could just paste what I have on my clipboard here and change it. First, I wouldn't want to just have the 8. I want to show all of my favorites, not just the first 8 on the list. And then I could come in here and say, and do a filter. So add the filter. And say where the current user's favorites contains this profile. And this will work. When I click on this button, I'm just going to toggle the state and come to the elements, set state. Element will be the portal, it'll be the favorite state, and we'll use the portal favorite state and is no. And that will toggle it. So if I come back in here, and I click on that, and then I click on this, it'll filter. And it's saying see more, and when I click see more, it shows me all of them. And the see more button doesn't reset the favorites. So let's go back to the see more here and edit this workflow. Display list, search for profiles. I think I don't want to show the see more button when my state is yes. So here, and portal favorites is no. Instead, what I want to do is I want to create this as a toggle. So what I'll have is in the appearance, it says view favorites, and then my conditional here is when the portal favorites is yes, I'm going to change the text to view all profiles. And when we view all profiles, so when we toggle it off, it'll just turn that to no. So so view favorites, and then I can view all profiles. I have a little bit of wonkiness going on because this text is larger, so it's knocking the button to a second line. But outside of that, it's working, and the toggle is working. So I'm going to refresh the page. I won't see the see more button because I don't have more than 8. I don't have any more profiles than what are showing here. So you're getting the idea, I hope, of how you can hide and show and filter. So we'll go ahead and consider that part as one way that we can view our favorites. Another way that we can filter by our favorites is with the hidden variable. So I'm going to create a pop-up on the page. I'm never going to show this pop-up, so I'm not really concerned with what it looks like. I'm going to call it pop-up hidden variables. And I got this from working in Canvas quite a bit. So we're going to come up to our containers, and I'm going to add a repeating group here. And the repeating group, I'm going to call it var favorites. And then in this type of content, it's going to be profiles, and the data source is going to be the current user's favorites. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this hidden variable to filter the repeating group down to my favorites. So I'm going to come in here into my repeating group and into this conditional. Right now, the portal favorites is yes. I'm actually changing the whole data source. And that's fine. I want to change the data source, but instead of filtering here, what I want to do is I want to do search for profiles, and then I want to say intersect with. And when I say intersect with var favorites, search for profiles, intersect with var favorites, list of profiles. This is going to give me a list of profiles that are overlapping from my search to my favorites list. And it will still work the same way. So when I view favorites, it will toggle it down. But this is a way to get out of doing an advanced filter. I can go ahead and pre-pull all of the favorites into that hidden variable and then use that to filter down through the intersect instead of doing an advanced filter, which can get cumbersome and kind of slow and clunky. The other advantage that we face with hidden variables is that whereas if I set a state, the state is static. So if I populate a list of profiles into a custom state, it stays still. It doesn't change unless I tell it to. Whereas if I put something in a hidden variable, if the list changes, if I click on the heart button of another profile and it gets added to the list, it will actually be reflected in this dynamic data source automatically. So I don't have to worry about resetting the state over and over again. I can just work with this variable and know that this will reflect the constraints that I've put on the search or the constraints that I've put in the data source automatically. All right, so I do believe that is it for our portal page. We have filter by company, keywords, search by name, and our favorites. And there's one last bit here. The current user should not be listed. Right now it doesn't matter because I'm running as an admin that doesn't have a profile, so I'm not seeing any extraneous users. But if I were to come back into my user table and run this as one of my standard users, I see myself on the list. Oh, it's giving me a 404. Probably because I ran as an inactive user. Yep, that's why. So let's run as this one instead. And that actually gives us a good point because we shouldn't see inactive users here either, which probably means we need to have an inactive state on our profile in addition to our user. But never mind that. I am currently logged in as Adam and I can see my own profile in the list of profiles, and that's not what I want. So let's go back into our portal page and into our repeating group and into our search here and ask the question, how are we going to make sure that the current user's profile is not listed here? So we're going to add one more constraint here and say unique ID is not the current user's profile's unique ID. Then we'll come in here and do the same thing. We'll say where the unique ID is not the current user's unique ID. Now when I refresh the page, I no longer see my own profile in here. I do see my see more button because remember, if something is hidden in, if this list, it has more to it, if a search for profiles has more profiles than is being shown in this list, that's the logic that we used on our see more button. I'm going to come back and change this just slightly and change here our search for profiles. And I'm going to flip this around because it's going to be easier to rewrite this if I flip it around and have my search in front. So I'm going to clear this expression and go ahead and delete that out. I'm going to borrow my search for profiles. I'm going to come back into my condition here and I'm going to paste that search for profiles. So search for profiles, then I'm going to take the items until 8. Search for profiles is count is greater than the repeating group list of profiles. Search for profiles count is greater than the list of profiles, and this will eliminate the count for the current user's profile. And then we'll say and the portal favorites is no, then the element is visible, and hopefully that will take it away. Yep, it does. All right, and then we need to show this dynamic text as well. So come back in here and we'll come into the appearance and we'll go insert dynamic data and just say RG's list of profiles count, and we'll leave it to say colleague showing. All right, and back to our scope, we can go ahead and mark this off and mark our portal as complete. We are very nearly there as far as this tutorial is concerned. So congratulations if you've stuck with us this long and you've been working to make your app functional. We're just going to go through some cleanup here. We're probably not going to do the last part of any app is doing all of the QA and getting everything working exactly as you want it. And that actually takes a great deal of time. So we're not going to do that. We just don't have time for it. But we will wrap up a few loose ends. But I did want to point out that the portal page, that was a fairly long video part section of our whole tutorial, and it is normal for things to take longer as you go into your app and make further changes on your app. And the reason is because every further change that you make has to be backwards compatible with all of the changes that you made before. So this back and forth bit that you're doing in your pages, that's normal. It's normal to have to go back and forth to get everything working just right. It's also normal to remember things as you're testing and you're like, oh, that doesn't look quite right. And then you have to go back and rethink your logic that you had implemented in the first place. Totally normal. So let's go to our reset password page. And the reason for going to our reset password page is because our workflow here, when the button confirm is clicked, it resets the password, but nothing happens afterwards. And we actually want to navigate the user to the index page so that they can be routed appropriately. So when a user arrives on the page and they are successful in resetting their password because the token hasn't expired, it actually logs them in at that point. So sending them to the index page will just send them to their correct portal. So now we can test our reset password functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our, I'm going to log in as Oh, I guess it doesn't really matter who I'm logged in as because I have this log out button here. So I'm logged out and it sent me to our home page. I click the login button. It's going to bring me here and I see my Tanya McGar +4 at gmail.com. So I'm going to click reset password. And something that we didn't do is we didn't inherit the emails from form to form, right? So fortunately, I didn't have to enter this email, so it's fine. But one challenge I would give you is to make sure that your users don't have to re-enter information again. So we're going to say Tanya McGar +4 at gmail.com. And I'm just going to check in my database and make sure that my Tanya McGar 4 user is not inactive, and they're not, so that's fine. So I'm going to send the reset link, and as always, please pardon the mess of my inbox. I'm just going to go in here, click this button, and I want to click the reset. But before I do that, I actually want to make sure, well, I am logged out, so I'm going to reset here. I'm going to type in my password and retype it in and click the confirm button, and it's going to send me into my portal because it sent me to the index and I'm logged in, so it sent me to my portal. So now we can check that off of our list. Our reset password is handled, and then our 404 page, there's nothing really for us to do here. I mean, you could go into your 404 page and make it much prettier than it currently is, but anyone is able to hang out on this page, so it's fine. We'll just go ahead and leave it and consider it done. Our general interactions, we've already worked on the header. The one thing that we didn't do is go back and make conditions for the header to show up differently on the different pages. So we're going to want the header to show a little bit different on the home page versus the login page versus the other pages. So what I want to show you is the condition to detect which page that you're on. So if I come into my header here, and I have a button that I want to show on some pages and not on others, I can come to my layout, make it not visible on page load. And I'm going to do this on a dummy button so that it doesn't really matter. So here we can make it not visible on page load, collapsed when hidden. And then the condition, if I only want to show that on the account page, for instance, I could say current page name is account, make this element visible. Now, if I go to my login page, I won't see that button. But if I go to my account page, I will see that button. All right, so that's the conditional you need to be able to make your header look exactly how you want it to look on any given page. So we'll go ahead and consider our header taken care of because you know how to make it do what you want it to do. Our external interactions is our reset password email. They should be able to click the link and be directed back in, and we just tested that and it's working. For our emails, we have our email list welcome, so we've completed that. We have our admin invitation email working, and our reset password is working. So we can consider our emails all taken care of. And then circling back, if you want to see, if you want to take care of some of the issues that I noticed when I was watching the tutorial back, we've made the dynamic page titles work, so that's all handled. I originally said on our header buttons on the home page when we were hiding them that I didn't want them to be collapsed, but I changed my mind. I was watching the video back and it didn't work exactly the way that we wanted to. So make sure to test things on mobile and make sure that they're working all the way down to the size that you want your users to be able to use screens of that size. I think 280 is the smallest I've ever been concerned with or seen anyone concerned with, but I usually target 320 as my smallest screen. I did check and we've got that handled. So there's an alert for the email list on the home page, and I don't think there was. So I think our pop-up was specifically in the scope. So don't worry about that. Dynamic interest in create a profile on login and account pages. So we did go back and refactor so that we are picking up the interest table in our create profile and edit profile. Um, then make required fields. We did make some required fields on the account page, but you could go back and refactor and make those same fields required when the user is creating their profile on the login page. Slugs and URLs. So I mentioned slugs before, but I didn't really talk about how slugs work with our URLs to make our URLs prettier. So the slug is a field that is available to us to utilize on every data table that we have in Bubble. And what it is when we set the content of a particular page to be a particular data table, if we are utilizing the slug, it will show, instead of the unique ID, it will show the slug, because remember, the slug is unique to its particular record within the data table. So let me give you an example. If I go to my app data and I go to my profile here for Adam and I say Adam-Jameson as a slug and I save that. Now, if I run my account page as Adam Jameson, I won't see the unique ID. I will actually see the slug. So if I run it as, let's see, if I run it as this person, myself, as Tanya, then I'm going to see my unique ID because my Tanya profile does not have my Tanya profile does not have a slug set, so it's just going to utilize the unique ID. But if I run it as Adam, who has a slug set, then you'll see here it makes the URL much prettier because instead of showing the unique ID, it shows Adam Jameson, which is the slug of Adam's profile. The workflow to be able to set the slug of a thing is slightly different than making changes to that thing. So if I'm on the account page and I'm looking at this button save and I want to set the profile slug, I actually have to use a separate action and come in here and to data and set a thing's slug. The thing would be the current page profile in this case, and the slug could be the current user's or not the current user, the current page profile's first name, and then dash and the current user or current page profile's last name, like so. Bubble will not allow the same value to be entered twice in the table for the slug. So if you have John Smith, which is a very common name, then it would say John Smith the first time, and the second time it would add a -1 behind it or a -2, and it would differentiate each one that you're feeding it in where it's the same. So Bubble will not allow you to have two of the same slug within the same table. All right, so that's our slug discussion. Testing and QA. So something that you should probably do with your app now is just go in and test every page and see how many things we didn't account for, how many things are a little bit weird, how many things can be improved. I like to keep a list, just like you see this circle back here. I was keeping a list of all the things I wanted to go back and fix. So go through and test and see all the things that you want to change the way that it's being done, and then tackle it one by one. And that's the easiest way to get through testing. And double checking security is always important. A lot of times you'll be creating test pages or doing something in here just to see if it works. You want to always make sure that it's an app admin on a test page, that no one can have access to your test page except you. We didn't set up any test pages, but it's something that's very common that I see. So don't just create a page that anyone can have access to, because if you deploy that live, anyone will have access to it, and they'll have access to those buttons and potentially be able to mess with your database in a way that you didn't intend. It's just a good practice to go through and look at all of your pages and make sure that the page is loaded or your do when is set so that no one who shouldn't have access to your page has access to your page. So I highly recommend you do that. All right, those were all of the circle back things that I wanted to do. We'll go ahead and consider that complete. And our pages are all complete. And we tackled our hidden variables, so we know how to control the interface in Bubble. Now let's talk about deploying to live. So in Bubble, you have two environments. You have your test environment and your live environment. And actually, if you're on an upgraded plan with Bubble, you will have access to additional test environments. We are on an agency plan, so you might have noticed up here, instead of saying main, mine says July 2023. So that means that all of the work that I've been doing in our tutorial has happened in this July 2023 without affecting the main development branch. So the other day I came in and I was on the main branch and I was fiddling around and I was like, why doesn't this look correct? Why doesn't my index have an event here? And the reason is because all of my work was stored on this other branch. So the way that branches work is that your development section is all based on one database, your development database here, and then your live, when you do publish to live or deploy to live, has a completely separate database. And the reason that's important is when you start working, you'll get very familiar with your test database and you'll add things to your test database like your app settings, right? I need to flip into my July 2023 to even be able to demonstrate what I'm thinking. So I have my app settings data table here that I set up in development. But when I deploy to live, first, in order to deploy to live, I actually have to come in to main and merge the changes into main. So here, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to merge changes from another branch, and I'm going to click continue. There are going to be a lot of changes because we've basically done a whole app's worth of changes on that branch. Bubble is going to say, hey, there's 180 non-conflicting changes to be merged here, and we're just going to go ahead and confirm them. So 2 conflicts found with July. We want to keep July 2023. So we'll go ahead and confirm these conflicts. I know that I want to keep July 2023 because I didn't mean to make any changes to the main branch. So I'll go ahead and confirm those. Bubble says, okay, we're good to go. And now I can deploy my main branch to live. So this is going to create it so that someone can go to the domain without the version specified, and it will show up. So I'm going to call this the launch. I'm going to click confirm. So now if I go to the live, it's going to kick me to the home exactly as I intended. But you'll notice that I don't have my logo here. And the reason I don't have my logo here is because, as I was explaining, our development database and our live database are 2 separate things. So our current live database doesn't have an app settings record at all. So I'm in the dev. So if I switch to live, you can see our app settings table doesn't even have a record. So the reason it's not showing my logo here is because I don't have an app settings with a logo in it. So in order to change that, I'm going to go ahead and copy and restore database. And I want to copy the development data into the live database. I could just decide to copy one type in or copy all of the types in. So I'm just going to choose the app settings. I'm not going to choose everything because the app settings are really the only app-wide settings or data that I want to send in. So now I'm going to go copy from development to live. They make you do this because this is a dangerous operation, as they are warning you here. You can overwrite live data if you're not careful here. In this case, we want to overwrite live data. So I'm going to go ahead and click confirm. And when I do that, it'll take a moment. But if I refresh my page, now I'm in my live database and I have my Who's Who directory and my logo here, and I'm just going to refresh the page, and now it says Who's Who directory home, and I have my logo there. It's a little bit tricky remembering what's going to be in your live database versus your dev database. It does take some getting used to in order to make testing smooth and make sure that you're not corrupting data. I recommend a lot of practice with that in order to get it right. And last but not least, there's the question of how can we do things in Bubble when the user is not present and clicking a button. So far, all of our workflows that we have done have been what are considered front-end workflows. So they're workflows where the user is present in the browser and they're interacting with your app. But there are plenty of situations where you might want to be able to interact with the app or change something in the app or do something from the app that the user didn't click a button to make it happen. And for that, we need to be able to schedule workflows. So what do you do when you want to do something in the future when the user will not be on the page? Enter the backend workflows. It's not the only reason to use backend workflows, but it is a really good one. So if we go into our settings, and into our where it says API here, you'll see a checkbox up at the top to enable workflow API and backend workflows. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us an extra option on the page selector menu to go into our backend workflows. So I'm going to just go ahead and check it here. I happen to be on the live. I need to go back into my main. So another branch management issue is now we've got our July 2023, which is currently synced up with our main. So I'm actually going to pop into the July 2023 and delete it. That way I don't get confused. Now I'm going to come into my main and I'm going to enable the backend workflows. And as soon as I do that, it's going to show me the workflow API root URL based on my app name. And I can use this later. It's not really relevant to our discussion. What is relevant is now I have the ability to choose to go into my backend workflows. So the first thing you'll notice is the settings page, it called this an API, right? So this is part of our API, and the application interface between two applications. That's what an API is. It's just letting two different applications talk to each other, or an application can talk to itself via its own API. And in fact, that's what we're talking about. Our backend workflows is using our own interface from externally in order to make things happen. So let's go to our backend workflows page. And first of all, you shouldn't be able to go to the design of the backend workflows. This is a bug because there's no design for the backend workflows. So now we're in the backend workflows, and it looks very much like our workflows on the front end, but there are a few differences. And what this is first of all, when I click to add an action on or a workflow on the front end workflows, I don't have this same option here. I have page load and element triggers and plugin triggers, things like that. In the back end, I can have an API workflow, I can have a recurring event, and I can have a database trigger event. You can almost entirely forget the recurring event. I hardly ever use them. I mainly stay in the API workflows and the database triggers. The API workflow is really helpful because I can actually schedule a workflow to happen at a specific time. So if I create a new API workflow here, I can say reminder email, and then I can send an email, and I can fill in all of the information. We'll just say the current user's email, and this is an email. And it's going to want some other information. So it's coming from Tanya, and the subject is hello. And we'll see what these last two. The API workflow needs a name. Oh, this one is empty, so we'll delete that. All right, so now I have a reminder email, and it's set to go out from the backend workflows. So the question is, how do I schedule this to work? So I can come to a test page, and remember I was saying with the test page, we want to make sure that it's protected. So we're going to go ahead and create an event here and say do when the condition is true. The condition is the current user's role is not app admin. Then we want to go to the index. We'll go to page index. That will protect our page from non-admins. The other thing I do in my test pages, besides upgrade them to the new responsive, is I'll put everything into a group that's not visible on page load unless the user is an app admin. So I'm going to go into a group here, and I'm going to make it a column, and then I will make it not visible on page load, collapsed when hidden, and I'm only going to show it when the current user's role is app admin. That way they'll never see the button because it won't load on page load, even for that brief second that they try to get to this page. This way it won't load. They won't be able to see the button to click it in the first place. So now I'm going to put a button here. On this button, I'm just going to call it schedule. And I'm going to say I want to trigger that backend workflow. So I'm going to come to custom events and schedule the API workflow, and I want that to happen at a particular date and time. So I can do this, and I can say current date and time, or I could say arbitrary date and time, and I could say September 15 at 9 a.m. And Bubble will anticipate that I mean September 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. and it's giving you here, it's telling you which time zone I'm in. And so now if I preview this page, first of all, it should kick me off because I don't think I'm logged in as an admin, and it did, it kicked me out. So now if I run it as an app admin, so this one, I am able to see the button and click the button, and I can see that something happened. But if I want to make sure that it happened, I can come into my logs area here. And you can see this is all of the usage that we've been doing on this app. So last weekend we had some, and then just in the last day or two. So this is our log section. It shows us our workload usage. So remember when I was saying to minimize our workload units, we want to be elegant with our workflows. I can also come into the scheduler part here of my logs, and I can click show, and it's going to show me all of the workflows that are scheduled after the current date and time. And you can see I've scheduled for September 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. the reminder email to go out. And so that is how you make things happen, even when the user is not currently on the page, because I can promise you I will not be on this app on September 15th of 2023. And that concludes our tutorial. Thank you so much for being with us. And if you have any questions or need any help, please do reach out to us at team@pronocoders.com. We would love for you to come to an office hours session to meet us and tell us what you're building and see if we can help you build your bubble app. You can sign up for a complimentary session at pronocoders.com/office-hours, and we'll see you then.